Accepting criticism as a dietitian is a really important part of building your interpersonal skills so that you can learn how to work with clients and retain them. You see, growing as a dietitian and growing in your dietitian business will require that you receive some difficult feedback and learn how to accept constructive criticism. But you might be wondering, well, what does that look like, and how do you tactically handle situations that might feel uncomfortable? Firstly, let's define criticism. Criticism is defined as the expression of disapproval of someone or something based on perceived faults or mistakes. Now, sometimes people aren't great at giving you feedback that comes off as criticism. It can actually come across as mean, rude, or even hurtful. So it's important for us to reflect for a moment and see if we can define what we've received as constructive or not. Criticism gives us a new perspective, and it opens our eyes to things that we may have overlooked or never even considered. And it also helps us identify our strengths and weaknesses so that we can grow as a person. Ultimately, having the ability to allow and accept and be open to criticism is a good part of growing your business skills. So although it's challenging, and although it can feel hurtful, it is an important part of developing as a registered dietitian. Now, you might have received criticism during your dietetic internship, maybe even if you worked at a clinical position or just in your life in general. And so you might reflect on a situation that didn't feel good, and I want to challenge you to think if you can reframe criticism and learn something positive from receiving that information. Criticism can come across in a couple ways, online or in person. So let's focus on the context of online. It can also be considered bullying. Now, if it starts to go into the whole hate speech quadrant, that's a whole different video for another day. If I'm specifically focusing on criticism, it might be somebody that says that they either gave you a bad review, or they gave you bad feedback, or they said something negative about you either behind your back, or they wrote a nasty comment on your social media or your blog post, or even sent you a nasty email. And what that can look like would be them saying, I don't want to do business with you, or I didn't like the service, or they were displeased with something about your service. So now that we've defined what that can look like and how you might stumble upon some criticism, the question would be, well, how do you handle it? Firstly, I encourage you to reframe your mindset around criticism and start to think how you can shift from somewhat of a fixed to a growth mindset. See if there's any opportunities to learn from the criticism that you've received. Not all criticism is constructive. Some criticism is negative and something that you don't want to actually take the time to value or think through, because people are just going to say something rude that's unhelpful. I'm talking about criticism that actually could be considered constructive. So if you're to analyze and receive constructive criticism that's not hateful or irrelevant or has no merit in your feedback process, here are some steps that you can take to sort through that criticism. First, stop your first reaction. At a first sign of criticism, before you do anything, stop and take a moment to reflect and think through what you're seeing or reading or hearing, how you're responding to it, and what feels good to you in that moment. Sometimes you just need to take a pause. Secondly, I want you to remember the benefit of receiving any feedback. Oftentimes as business owners, we're starving for feedback. So when we do get feedback, even if it's not desirable, take a moment to think and reflect on, if it's constructive, what might you be able to do to help improve your process for the next time around. Thirdly, listen for understanding. If you have a chance to dig deeper on the criticism and learn more about what you can do, whether that's through an exchanged email or through a conversation, you might have a chance to get underneath the surface of what that person was trying to say so that you can improve whatever it is you're doing to get a better outcome for future clients or for that existing client. Say thank you, because if someone's taken the time to give you some criticism and it's something that you can actually use to improve, that's actually a benefit. It hurts in the moment and feels uncomfortable, but that's actually really good for the future of your business. The fact that you've gotten some honest communication can be really helpful. You want to make sure you're asking questions and deconstructing the feedback. Now, if you're not able to do this with the person who provided the feedback, this might be something that you can ask yourself, or you might be able to ask your team if you work with a team, or you might be able to ask a business coach if you're working with someone, to really decipher what you're not seeing or hearing from the feedback that you've received. Lastly, you can request some time and follow up. Now, this depends on the constructive criticism. You might not want to follow up depending on the situation. You might want to drop it. I'd have to give some examples for that. If you can follow up, it's a good opportunity to try to preserve the relationship if it isn't totally soured. Lastly, I want you to practice reframing your mindset. As a dietitian, you are always going to get some criticism that's going to be negative, some helpful, constructive, some not. So as you grow, you're going to have a larger amount of constructive and negative criticism based on you personally and the work that you're doing, whether it's people that don't agree with your philosophy or people that didn't agree with something you did with your product or service. That's going to happen. So the question is, what can you do, or what process can you create knowing that this is coming? Right? And that might mean that you've incorporated some meditation. That might mean that you've incorporated therapy. That might mean that you have a networking practice where you can talk to people about what's going on and try to develop a better, thicker skin and a better sense of how to respond in a way that's aligned with your mission, vision, and values of your business. Now, if you're looking for support from a team that understands registered dietitians and what it looks like to receive criticism as a dietitian, I want to invite you to join the library. We've created an affordable monthly membership where you have access to content, which is our curriculum, and our coaches, including me, with live calls and opportunities for coaching, as well as templates and access to guests. I want you to join using the link below, and I also want you to check out this next video where I talk about how you can handle criticism in real time, and I give a specific example using the food police.